guys, it's Brad from Ellicott City Sovac. I'm so excited because we finally got the new Baby Lock Solaris. I've had it for 2 days now, and I've been playing with it. There are a lot of really exciting features, a lot of cool things that it does. And so I wanted to go ahead and make a video that shows you my favorite features. So what we're going to do is the top 10 coolest features on the Baby Lock Solaris. Now, these aren't in any particular order. I didn't want to go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. So I'm just going to go through them and show you what I think are the coolest features. And let's begin. Number 1. So I don't think there could be any doubt whatsoever if you've heard anything at all about this machine, what I'm about to show you, because it is really, really awesome. It's the coolest thing. It's something no other machine can do. I never would have thought of even asking for a machine to do this. It's like Henry Ford said, if I'd have asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. It's the same kind of thing. So in case you don't know, this machine has a projector built into it. It's called the IQ Visionary Projector. And what do you do with a projector on a sewing machine? Well, let me show you what you do with a projector on a sewing machine. Okay, now what I've got going on here is I've got the collar of a shirt in my hoop here, and I want to put an embroidery design and I want to fit it right on the collar of the shirt. Now, what I could do in the past on like a Destiny or something like that is I would be able to use the scanner to scan in this area and then place my design on there. But I wouldn't be able to see exactly what it's going to look like on my garment. Well, with a projector, you can. This machine has a laser projector built into it that can project your stitches right onto the object, and it can even do it on a dark colored object like this shirt. So let me show you what this looks like. It's really cool. I'm going to turn on the projector now. So here we go. And so here is my design. Let's look on the screen at what we're seeing. I've got this little rhinoceros beetle that I've brought up. And you see how there's this rectangle here? That is the area that is currently being projected onto my material. So you can see that we've got the bottom part of the beetle, so I can see how far down it goes. And then I'm just going to put my finger on the screen. Here, I'll let you watch me do it. So I can move up so I can see the top of the beetle. And then I look back over at my fabric, and we can see that the top of the beetle extends up to this part on my collar. And I can move that whenever I want, so I can just take a look and see to make sure that my design lays exactly where I expect it to lay anytime I do this. It's really pretty neat. You can also change the background color of your projection. So if I'm doing this on a dark color like this, and I can't see it very well, I've actually turned the lights off on the machine so that you can see the projection better on this video. But if you're sitting in your home and it's difficult for you to see it, you put a white background on there and it contrasts nicely with that. So depending on what type of material you're using, you may want to have that background turned on or off. But I mean, this is really, really cool, the way that it projects my embroidery right onto my fabric like that. It's almost magical. Number 2. So the projector on the embroidery mode is really cool. There's a lot of really awesome applications for that. I love it. It's really, really neat. But you can also use the projector in sewing mode. And you may be thinking, what am I going to do with that projector in sewing mode? Well, it can not only project a line like the Destiny or the Crescendo or the Unity can project a laser line. This can project a line and a whole bunch of other stuff. Check it out. Watch what we can do. If I'm looking at my machine and I select a stitch, at any time I can touch this icon. It's like a little cone. And that will dim the lights and turn on a projection. Let me zoom in here and see if we can't see this on the video. So this is my straight stitch. Not that impressive because it's just a straight line. But we can do some interesting things with just this straight line. Let me get a little bit closer. So we can see that my line is showing up and it's blue. I don't know if that's coming through on the video or not. But we can actually change the color of our line. Now it's red. Now it's yellow. So you can preview what your stitches are going to look like against the fabric that you're using. And then we can also be sure that if we were to start sewing, this is where my stitch is going to be. So imagine that you're lining up a stitch to put on a zipper. If we have our zipper here and we know exactly where we want our stitches to lay, we can actually move these stitches over so that they are right on where they need to go for our zipper. So watch how that works. I've actually got, if you look right here, I've got these little projected buttons here, and there's a controller that comes with your machine, this little stylus, and it has a light that lights up when you hit it. And you just move that over the button that you want to engage and hit it, and watch my straight stitch up here. I'm trying to do this. There we go. See how it's moving over a little bit at a time? That's my left-right shift. I can move the position of any stitch to the left or to the right just by using this tool. And the advantage of doing it this way, instead of looking over at the screen like you normally would, and going over and hitting, okay, so I can adjust this left-right shift. With this, it does the exact same thing. But the advantage is it changes it so subtly that you can be looking at it while it's making the change, whereas, I have to look at my screen otherwise. So I can see exactly what changes I'm making. It's really quite neat. Now, things get a little more interesting if you have a stitch other than a straight stitch. So I'm just going to select a zigzag stitch, and you can see that my zigzag is showing up real nice on here. And just like it would on the screen, if I were to change my settings, I have these controls over here, and I can change them. And look what it's doing. It's getting tighter and tighter until eventually it'll become a satin stitch. And I'm just using my stylus to do this. But you can see that now it's almost solid. It's a satin stitch now. And if I want to make the stitch wider, I've got a control for that too, right here. This is my stitch width. So I can go ahead and make my stitch wider or narrower. I'm just moving the button, or moving the stylus right over the button and hitting. There's a button on the stylus that does this. And you can see that stitch getting fatter as it goes. Super, super neat. And then we can also go and use a decorative stitch the same way. I can go over here to my character decorative stitches. I love the new sounds that it makes too. I'll get to that. And I can just touch, any of these. And it is, of course, projecting my stitch in real size onto my fabric. Look at that. That is so cool. And all the same settings apply. So if I want to make my stitch length shorter, I can use this, and it's going to pull those closer together. If I want to make them narrower or wider, I can just use the controls provided here on the projection. So that's cool. And of course, I can still just use the buttons right on the screen. If I wanted to do that, I can. So now I'm adjusting it by touching the screen. But it actually changes it right on my material. So that is super, super cool. You can also bring up a stitch selector. If I hit this icon here, look at that. I can choose what stitches I want. Right from here, I can preview all of my decorative stitches in line as they go. And then when I find, ooh, that's the one that I want, I just hit set here, and it's brought it in, and I can change it, adjust the settings accordingly. So that is super, super neat. I love it. Big fan of that. Now, that's not all that we can do with the projector in the sewing mode, though. Check this out. If we hit the guideline button here instead of the projection button, watch what happens. We hit this, we turn on the guideline, and look what we get. I'm going to turn the camera and look down here. What we get here are two lines. Why are there two? Well, one is where your stitch is, and the other one is, guess how far away from it. Let's take a measuring tape and look. That is exactly 1/4 inch. So you can use the laser as both the stitching guideline and as a 1/4 inch guideline. Whereas on the other machine, if you want to use guidelines, it'll only project one at a time. So, you don't get to use them. And the other thing is I can actually move these forward a little bit too. If I adjust, there's a button on the screen I'm adjusting right here for mainline position. I'm moving them forward a little bit. So I can actually extend the lines out a little bit farther than default, which is nice. And we can also, if instead of doing this 1/4" guideline, I can actually turn on an entire grid where it just shows me this entire grid area, which I can also set to be a 1/4". I'm going to set that right now. So this is a 1/4". Each one of these is a 1/4". There's all kinds of stuff that would be useful for. And then let's see, what else can we do? We can set it to display angles. Look at this. This is a 90-degree angle. Here, we can zoom in a little bit. This is a 90-degree... Oh, wiggling my camera too much. This is a 90-degree angle here, and this is a 1/4" from this. Super, super awesome. We can also set the angle ourselves. That's a 90. This is a 60. This is a 45. I mean, imagine doing like Hunter Stars or anything like that. Really, really awesome the way that works. Yeah, we can adjust our seam allowance too. So if I move this, you can't see what I'm doing on the screen, but I'm adjusting my seam allowance. And it'll tell me when I get to 5/8, when I get to a half, all those kinds of things. So, I mean, that's really, really neat. Number 3. Let me show you how beautiful this machine looks on its own. Look at that thing. With the lid closed, this is certainly a handsome beast. Okay? And one thing that I really, really like is that I don't have to take this beautiful top cover off of the machine in order to use the vertical spool pin. Now, the vertical spool pin comes with this machine. It comes with a Destiny. It came with the Elissimo. Vertical spool pin is really, really useful for if you're using cones of thread. Cones of thread want to spool off vertically. They don't want to spool off this way. And it really helps if you have a vertical spool pin. So on this machine, what we do is we take this lid, and instead of removing it like we did on the last couple of machines, we flip it all the way back. And I'm going to pick up the camera so you can see. This has little magnetic spots here and here that are made to grab onto the bottom of this. What's this? This is actually the vertical spool pin. It comes in this really, really cool case. You just grab these little pinchers and pull this part away, revealing the folded up vertical spool pin. So I just take this and flip it up and flip the thread tree out like that. And here I flip up my spool pins like that. There you have it. And this has little magnetic receptacles here and here. Take it, I just drop it right on top of the machine, and it fits on there perfectly. I love it. The second thing I want to talk about is right underneath of my vertical spool pin, we see this little dial here. What this does is sets how much the bobbin is going to wind when you wind your bobbin. So if you don't want a full bobbin, you only need a 1/4 of a bobbin filled. Instead of having to sit there and time it, you just set this to wherever you want it. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 clicks. So that's going to be 25%, 50%, 75%, 100%. Very, very nifty that it gives you that. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this section is the new and improved treasure chest. Look at this thing. It's enormous. It's got a whole nother section to it that the previous model didn't. But this has a hinged lid. Okay? It's hinged. I don't have to take the lid and figure out how to unsnap it. It just has these really easy to push little snaps right here. You push one, it opens up. There you go. And all of your accessories fit nicely in here. These little trays pull out, and you can put them in the sewing table on the machine if you want to use that. Oh, it's so much better than the old one. It even feels nice. The plastic is different. I really, really like this treasure chest, guys. Very awesome.
Number 4.
Now, if I was really ranking these in terms of how cool I think that they are, it would probably be number 2. I mean, number 1 would obviously be the projector. But the needle plate has always been kind of a problem on all of the machines that we've sold for the past 10 years or so. And it's only a problem because the way that it operates is a little tiny bit confusing. I actually made a YouTube video explaining exactly what you need to do if you're going to take your needle plate off. But because it was a two-part needle plate, there were things that you had to do in the right order. Namely, you had to put the bobbin case back in after you put the metal part back on. That's all in the past now, at least for the top of the line, because this is a single-piece needle plate that you don't need to use a screwdriver to take in and out. Let me show you the way it works because it's like really awesome. Look at this. This is a single metal needle plate. It's all one piece, which they actually used to all be that way back with the old Asantes and machines like that. But they were still a pain to take out because you had to use this little teeny tiny screwdriver to get in there and remove it. You don't have to do that now. Watch this. All I've got to do is reach over here and pull on this lever. The whole needle plate just comes out just like that. So if I want to switch needle plates to the straight stitch needle plate, or I just want to get in here and clean something out, or there's a jam or something like that I need to get in there, it just pops out in one piece. You don't have to worry about taking it out and putting everything back together the right order. It just works. To put it back in is just as easy. You just push this over and push straight down, and it locks into place. It could not be easier. And I love it.
Number 5.
The next thing is that they've added some really cool quilting embroidery features into the machine that we didn't have on the Destiny. The first thing that I'm going to show you is a way to make quilted outlines on some smaller quilting projects. That's really quite neat and similar to the way a long arm works. Watch. Now, if I go into my embroidery mode and hit this Q button here, I get a selection of these quilting outlines, and there's 10 of them to pick from, so I'll just pick one. I'll do these little spirally guys. And you bring it up and it shows you a preview of what the design is. And when we hit set, instead of going to the normal embroidery edit screen, it comes to this rather curious screen. Basically, it's asking me for measurements. So it wants a horizontal measurement, a vertical measurement, and then it wants a measurement of what each individual pattern, what its height needs to be. So what this means is, say we're doing a placemat, and the placemat is 19 inches wide, right? Or maybe we're doing it lengthwise, and it's a foot. Say it's 12 inches on one side, and then it's 24 inches on the other side. Yeah, you can't see what I'm typing. I'm typing it in down here. There's a little area for me to type. Hit set. Okay, and then I can set what the height of each pattern is. So let's say I want them to be 3 inches, and we'll set that. Okay, so once we have all of our measurements put in, we just hit next. And what it does is it actually figures out exactly how to repeat this pattern going around to fit that area. So this is going to fill that 24 by 12 area that I asked for. And each one of these is a hooping, and it splits the design into 4 pieces. So I have to hoop the design 4 different times, but it has created 4 separate embroidery designs here. When I hit memory down at the bottom, it saves this. Now I'll do a separate video at some point on how to actually sew one of these out, but it's pretty neat. It lets you automatically split these quilting designs, and it links them up for you. It uses the camera to link them back up when you're done, and is really, really nifty. So that's really cool. And then another thing that they added, I'm just going to hit the home button here and go back into embroidery, is they added the ability to add echo quilting around any embroidery design you choose. So I'm actually going to go in here and I'm going to pick a design out of one of these monograms. This is a new monogram font, by the way, that's added to this machine, but it has a little design at the bottom that I want to use for this little flourish right here. And we're going to hit set. So I have a new button that I didn't have, and well, it's hidden in the same button that we had on the Destiny. So on the Destiny, we could add stippling around an object, and it's this icon that I hit. But we have a new option here, and if you look there, there's actually 2 modes here. And one is Echo Quilting mode, which is the one that I have it in now. And look what it did. It created echo outlines around my design. Isn't that cool? Now I can pick how far away from the design that happens. I don't have to fill the entire hoop with it if I don't want to. so I can have it, show up in a smaller area. Like say, and it takes a minute for it to figure it out. But here, this doesn't fill quite the entire thing. I can also change the spacing between each ripple. So if I want it to be more or less of a meandering kind of echo, and it takes it a minute to populate it. So it's thinking about it right now. There it goes. So we've got further spaced apart echoes. So that's also new. Couldn't do that on the old machine. We can, of course, still put the stippling around stuff, but echo quilting is real big nowadays. So pretty great that you get that. Number 6. Number 6 is that this machine has a larger throat space, which, the Destiny throat space was pretty darn big, but this is 13 inches to the right of the needle, which is astonishing. It's the biggest machine I've ever seen that's like a home sewing machine. It's not like a long arm or something. You can do really, really big projects on this machine, and we still have 5 inches from here to here. So it's got a larger arm, and it has 5 inches from here to here, and it has even more lights on it than even the Destiny did, which lights up the whole part of the room you put it in. This is the same way. It just lights up, and you've got tons of space to work with. It's really, really cool. And then something else that they did that is really, really excellent. They changed the way the bed of the machine is made. Instead of being the real shiny plastic, like, let me get a little closer here. The top part of the machine up here, you see how reflective it is? Kind of hard to see, but this is shiny. Now down here, the needle plate is reflective, but even with all of these LED lights shining down here, we don't see much reflection. And that's because they've changed the texture of the bed of the machine. If you've got a Destiny or an Elissimo or basically any other machine that's an embroidery machine, you'll know that very quickly the bed of your machine gets scratched up from the embroidery unit moving. Just the embroidery hoop moving against the bed of the machine, and it marks it up. It happens real quick. People complain about it. There's not a lot you can do about it. I mean, you can polish it, but it goes away pretty quick and looks roughed up again. And actually, a lot of the time, I have people complain that their machine looks more scratched up because once you polish a machine, once you clean it, you can actually see the damage to the bed a little easier. So I really, really appreciate that they did this. This should last a lot longer and look nice.
Number 7.
Of course, the other elephant in the room has to be the hoop size. This embroidery machine has the largest single embroidery field of any embroidery machine ever. The maximum embroidery field on this thing is 10 5/8 by 16 inches, which is just an astronomical size. And not only did they improve the size of the embroidery area on this, they actually improved the hoop a little bit too. So let me show you the maximum embroidery field on this thing, and you'll see what I mean. So this is the big hoop for the Solaris, and it is like freaking enormous. For comparison, here is the Destiny large embroidery hoop. As you can see, the Solaris one is significantly larger, and 16 by 10 5/8. Now, that's not the only thing that's different about this hoop. Take a look at this. This is not a screw. This is a latch. This is awesome. It's such a pain, and it's difficult to use your fingers to tighten the screws on all of the embroidery hoops, let alone the very biggest ones. So I really, really love that this is how this works. That's really cool. When I first heard that they were going to do this, I was kind of worried because there's another brand out there that I used to sell that switched to latches like this, and they broke constantly, but they made theirs of plastic. This is all metal, baby, and that is not going to break. I really, really, really like this. Very cool.
Number 8.
Now, we also, of course, have a lot of really neat stuff added to IQ Designer. Now, IQ Designer is the digitizing program that is built into the Solaris and the Destiny. And it does a lot of really neat stuff on the Destiny, but they have really outdone themselves with the things that we can make on the IQ Designer and the Solaris. It is incredibly cool. So let's take a look at some of the new stuff that they've added to the IQ Designer. First of all, they have added a whole slew of new decorative fill patterns for us to choose from. So let's see. We go in, and I'm just gonna bring in a shape, and I'm gonna throw some fill patterns in here. So this first section is ones we've always had, or at least the first 10 of them we've always had. The next 5 were added on the Destiny 2 upgrade. And we're going to scroll down here. The totally new ones are 16 through 30. So we look down here. These are all totally new. And we can either use this slider on the side or just use your finger as if you're using a smartphone to scroll through these. But there's some really neat ones. There's some basic geometric shapes, which are always good to use. And then there's also some that are a bit more complex. So I'm just going to pick one of them and say OK. And I'm just going to toss that into my shape. Now, if I take this and hit next to go to the preview page, it's going to generate the lines that are making up the decorative pattern in here. And we can do some neat stuff to these that we didn't used to be able to do. For one thing, I can, when I change something on this screen, it actually happens without having to switch to another screen. It shows me what it is. So basically, they've combined the preview page with the settings page, which I love. You don't have to keep switching back and forth. So if I go in here and I change, say, the pattern size, it reflects right away. It redigitizes it and reflects right away that it's done the smaller pattern size. I also have a greater amount of rotation that I can do with this. You used to be able to rotate it just a little bit at a time. Now I can do, it used to be, I think it was 90 degrees at a time. Now we can do 30 degrees, 15 degrees. It's able to rotate really well. That's nice. And then we have the ability down here. This allows me to add distortion. So I can hit this and just increase the shift, and it randomly messes with the way that my design sews out. Now this design doesn't look that great using that, and actually it becomes more pronounced with a design like this, kind of the larger the scale the design is. But watch this. If I go in here, actually I could have done it from that previous screen. I'm just so used to the old machine. But here I'm going to go in and pick a different pattern. Like, let's say this thatch pattern. Watch what happens when I distort this. It looks really cool. I'm going to start with 1. And it kind of starts to look, I'm going to zoom in a bit. See how it kind of starts to look a little crazed? I really like that. I'm going to bump it up to 2. That's neat. I like it. So we've got the ability to take these designs and create new designs out of them. That's really cool. Another thing that we can do, I'm going to set this back to 0. Another thing that we can do, and let me just pick a different fill for this. Is I can focus on different parts of a repeating pattern. So if instead of focusing on this part here, I want to focus on somewhere in the middle of this pattern, I have an icon here that allows me to shift where I'm looking in the pattern. It's called position offset. So I'm just going to change it kind of a random amount and let you see what it's doing. And you can kind of figure out exactly how far you need to move to get the effect you're looking for. But watch as I hit OK here. Watch what it does. See how it's shifted where the focal point was? The focal point was here, and now it's here. And I can move it anywhere I want. So I keep moving the way I'm moving, and I could focus on this part of the pattern, which is really awesome. We never had the ability to do that before. You kind of were stuck with where it gave you. So I really like that. Just going to clear the page. Now, another neat thing we have is we have new line types, which is really neat. So what do I mean by line types? Well, if we go in and we have an object that is, instead of having something filled in, is just an outline, like here, we'll do, what would be a good shape to do this with? Here, actually, I'll make a little applique. So we've got a shape here, and I want to choose a line type for it. I'm actually going to choose it on the next screen so we can just keep switching between them. So right now, the line type is a satin stitch. We've got two new options here that we didn't have before. We've got a blanket stitch or E-stitch, and we've got a V-stitch for doing appliques. That's cool. Still got a chain stitch and a candle wick, bean stitch and a run. But what's this? If we touch that, look at that. It's a whole category of decorative stitches. So we can go in and choose one of these to be our outline, and it'll preview it for me right here. I've got these cool little, let's zoom in on that, cool little geometric shapes going around my pattern. I can think of all different kinds of stuff that we could do with that. But we can also go in and create our own appliques. Now, this is a pretty basic shape to be making an applique with, but look at this. If I go in and I change my stitch type, I could have my run part to hold down my applique, and I save that, and then I could go in and bring in my blanket stitch, and there we go. We've got a blanket stitch or an E-stitch for doing our appliques. We could also, of course, use a satin stitch, but before, all we could do is use a satin stitch. We didn't have the ability to use a blanket or E-stitch, which is really, really neat. And of course, we can adjust the amount of our bite. If we want to have a really big bite, we can. Or if we wanted to have a really small bite, we can do that too. Totally cool. Another thing that I'm really excited about is the machine is much better at tracing an image off of a file on your USB drive. The original Destiny wasn't real good at this, and this machine can do it much better. If I go in here and I pick kind of a complicated block design, I can pretty much trust that it's going to be able to trace it really easily. See how quick that does that? And then I just bring it in to the preview screen. It's going to turn it into stitches for me, which I can then convert to be whatever type of stitch I want. Right now it's a satin stitch, but let me zoom in on that. Look how detailed that is. That is really cool. Destiny wouldn't be able to handle an image like that. It would tell me that the line information is too complex, which can be really frustrating when you have an interesting object that you want to do and it comes back and tells you that. So I can go over here and tell it that I want this to be, whatever type of line I want. So say I want it to be just a run stitch. I'm going to use it as a quilting design. I can do that. And we can really get in there and get a look at just how complicated that design really is. That is excellent. So I'm very, very pleased with that.
Number 9.
Now, this is a really, really big one for me, anyway. They've never had Floriani as a thread chart in any baby lock machine ever. And now they do. They added Floriani, a bunch of other thread charts I don't care about too. But the Floriani one is one important to me because that's what the thread I sell. So it's really, really cool that we are able to use Floriani thread as a thread chart in here. Let me show you. We can go into the settings page here, and where, let's see, I forget what page that's on. Let's see. It's going to be on embroidery. So let's get over to the embroidery section. Next page, thread brand, Floriani. Okay, so let's see what the other new ones are. Oh, we'll scroll through these. Iris, Polyfast, Simplicity Pro, Gutermann. Anyway, but Floriani, that's the important one. Look at that. We can choose Floriani, and not only does it have the thread numbers, but it also has the actual official names from Floriani for all the colors. That's so great because before it would only let you do for some of these other thread charts, other than like the Baby Lock kind of branded ones. It would only give you the generic name of colors. Or you could use the color number. Whereas this, it actually has the actual names for the Floriani colors. I love that. That is so cool.
Number 10.
So the last thing I'm going to talk about is the stylus and capacitive touchscreen that we have on this new machine. Because this machine uses a capacitive touchscreen, a normal stylus isn't going to work with it. You don't need to know necessarily what exactly a capacitive touchscreen versus a resistive touchscreen is. Just know that a normal stylus isn't going to work. It has to conduct electricity. So your hand works because you conduct electricity, but a piece of plastic, just regular plastic, is not going to work. But the advantage is it's much more precise. So if I want to draw on the screen, say in the IQ Designer, you can do that much, much easier than you could on the Destiny, whose resistive touchscreen would kind of show up, the spot where you're hitting kind of shows up a little bit to the left or to the right, I forget which one, of where you touch. So it makes it very difficult to draw directly on the screen. But with this new stylus, we can very easily. It also makes it easier for the machine to register you touching it. So I like that. And it also makes it so that the machine can handle 2 inputs at once, well, or more. But on a Destiny, you could actually lock it up if you touched it in 2 places at once. And the Solaris is designed from the ground up to be touched in 2 places at once. So for stuff like increasing a size of an embroidery design or zooming in on the IQ Designer, you can pinch to zoom. So watch, I'll show you. So if I go in here and I bring up an embroidery design and I want to resize it, just go ahead and set that. And we go to Edit and Size. If I want to resize this design, I'm going to go ahead and tell it to keep the stitches the same. Oops. If I want to change the size, I can do it just like this. Oh, it's got to think about recalculating the stitches. But once it's done, then I can make it smaller again, just like that. Just like you would on a phone. So you can pinch to change the size. Very, very cool. And similarly, we can do a pinch to zoom on our IQ Designer. So if I've drawn a shape and I want to zoom in on it to edit it, I can just pinch and that zooms me in, just like I'm on a smartphone on my web browser or something. So that's a little thing, but I really do like it because, we're trained to use smart devices now, and we use certain gestures to do things just kind of instinctually, and a lot of times I've trained people on Destinies and they've gone like that to try and zoom in. It didn't work. Now it will. So that's pretty cool. So that's not everything this machine does. It's not every feature, but I thought those were the coolest things that it does. One cool thing that it does that I didn't talk about is that it does have built-in Wi-Fi if you use Palette. So I'm going to do a separate thing on that later. But this does have built-in Wi-Fi. You can send designs to it wirelessly over your home network. And of course, it has USB ports, just like anything else. We can use USB drives and stuff. So I hope you thought that was as cool as I did. And I know this was a long video, but I like to watch in-depth things, so I hope that some of you guys do too. So give us a call or come in and see the new machine. I am about to go to St. Louis to Baby Lock Tech. I'm going to get trained on, hopefully they'll show me some other neat stuff that I don't know about on the machine, and that'll be good, and I can come back and share it with you guys. The big reveal, official reveal from us is September 5th, and you can call and sign up for that and come in for the demo and get some free stuff, so you may as well do that. And yeah, so I hope you liked this video. I hope you came away with a better understanding of what the new stuff is that we can do with the Baby Lock Solaris and why you should trade in your Destiny and get a Solaris. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.